Hello everyone, Tony Pileggi here. We're professors at Centennial College. We are in C119, the engines lab, and I'm just going to go over some basics for component identification on engines. We've got a few different engines here. But first thing I want to tackle is determining front, back, right, and left of the engine. The back of the motor, so on this Subaru 3.6 horizontally opposed engine, the back of the motor is back here. And the transaxle or transmission is always bolted to the back of the motor. Never to the right, never to the left, never to the front, always at the back. Obviously, the opposite end from the back would be the front of the motor, right here. And here, if we look closely, we can see a timing chain here. And now, to determine right or left, there's a lot of engines that are installed in an engine where the front of the motor could be facing the front of the car, could be facing the right-hand side of the car, or the left-hand side of the car. So, the back of the motor, I am facing the back of this engine right now. My right hand, this is the right-hand side of the motor right here. This is the left-hand side of the motor. So we've got the back here, we've got the front, we've got the right, and the left-hand side of the engine. If we look at this V8 here, the back of the motor is right back there. This is the front, this would be the right, this would be the left side. If you look at this four-cylinder here, back of the motor where the transmission is bolted to, it's back here. This is the front, this is the right, this is the left. Now, this, like I said, it makes no difference which way the engine is put inside the car. So when you lift that hood, and if we're looking down inside the engine compartment, and the front of the motor is there on the right, to your right, that is still the front of the motor. The back is the opposite. The side closest to you is the right-hand side, and the side towards the firewall is the left-hand side. Okay? Now, we have this horizontally opposed Subaru engine, and our crankshaft is in the center here. This is a 6-cylinder. We've got 3 pistons here, so 1 piston per cylinder, 3 on this side. And the reasons why it's called horizontally opposed is because those pistons are moving back and forth horizontally. They're opposing each other. So the Subaru uses this, older style Volkswagens use this. Popular engine, lots of power. And this black piece here is our intake manifold on this engine. So we need, just like we have to breathe air in, so does an engine. So this is our air intake through the intake manifold. And when we breathe air in, we need to exhaust the air out. So we do have an exhaust system on here. You don't see it on this engine for you to look at. But so this is our horizontally opposed boxer engine. Now, what we've got here is we have a V8, so it's got 8 cylinders. And the reason why we call it a V8 is because our cylinders, the cylinder block is shaped like a V, and our pistons are moving up and down like this. Okay. So we also have, in this engine, we can have a V6 engine. So, same style V-shaped engine with 3 cylinders on each side. V6, V8, we can have V10, V12 engines, okay? And this particular engine, it has 2-cylinder heads, and I did not talk about the cylinder heads here. So, in the engine itself, I talked about the intake, we've talked about, I'm going to talk to you about the cylinder heads. This is the cylinder heads here. Now, in this cylinder head, this has 2 cylinder heads, one on each side. This particular cylinder head on the Subaru engine has the camshafts. It's got 2 camshafts in each cylinder head. So this is what we call a dual overhead cam engine. So it's got 2 camshafts in each cylinder head. So that's a dual overhead cam engine. The cylinder head itself is bolted to the block. And the cylinder head, this is one cylinder head here, and this is the other cylinder head right there. Okay? On this LS motor, just spin it around. So this is our engine block. This is the end of the crankshaft here. You can see one of the pistons, one of the valves, push rod engine. This actually has the camshaft in the block. And our cylinder heads are right here. So only what's in the cylinder head are the rocker arms, springs, valve springs, valves, okay? And what's cut away here is what we call a valve cover, also called a rocker cover, or some manufacturers call it a cylinder head cover, okay? They all mean the same thing. Our valve cover on this engine here is on the side here. This cover in the front that you're seeing is a timing cover. Okay? So let's flip this back around. And this black component on the top here is our intake manifold. Our fresh air comes in through here, through this throttle plate, in through the intake manifold, and that distributes the air to each cylinder. This component here, where it's got red painted on the inside, this is our exhaust manifold, okay? So every car must have an intake manifold and an exhaust manifold. This has 2 exhaust manifolds. The Subaru, because it's got 2 cylinder heads, will also have 2 exhaust manifolds as well. Okay, so we've talked about the horizontally opposed engine, the super engine. We've talked about this V8 here, the Chevrolet V8 LS motor. And like I said, we can have a V8, we can have a V6, we can have a V10, V12, okay? And then V is the shape of the block, and those pistons are traveling up and down. Now, what we got here is what we call an inline 4-cylinder. So we've got 4 cylinders here, and this engine is complete with only the intake manifold right here. Exhaust manifold is missing, so it would be on this side here. The back of the motor is back here. This is the front of the motor, and what you see here is this has got a dual overhead cam, just like the Subaru engine, but it only has 1 cylinder head, and that cylinder head goes from here to here. There's the cylinder head. Our cylinder block is there to there, and this is our oil pan here. What you see here is a timing chain, so you see the front of the camshaft, the 2 camshafts. This has got variable valve timing. This is what this is why this cam here looks much different than this one here. This is run by a timing chain, and this other small chain here is a balance shaft chain, and we'll talk about those in theory class. Now, with these 4 cylinders, you could have an engine that could be an inline 5-cylinder. Chevy's had those, Audi's had them as well. And you can have an inline 6, which most manufacturers did make, and if they don't make, they still make them today. Like this BMW here. This is an inline 6-cylinder engine. Some of you might be familiar. This has a Vano system, so it's got variable valve lift and variable valve timing. But on this engine here, the back of the motor is here, the front of the engine is here, the right side of the engine is right here. This is where our exhaust manifold is here. And manifold would be here, but it's missing on this particular engine. Okay, this is our valve cover, rocker cover, or cylinder head cover. And when you actually come into the lab and look at these engines, you're going to notice that this valve cover is plastic. And most valve covers today, the manufacturers are going to plastic only because it saves weight. So the timing chain is covered in here. You can see this is also a dual overhead cam. This is the timing chain. The front of both camshaft gears is here. Okay, so every manufacturer does things a little different, but when we're identifying parts and what an engine looks like and what we call it, they're all the same, right? An inline, whether it be an inline 4, inline 5, inline 6. Well, this is an inline 6, inline 4. You can have a V6, a V8, a V10, a V12, and the horizontally opposed Subaru engine. Okay, thanks for watching.